So because I've been so successful in the last 3 weeks, let's say, in all the multi-platform sort of content distribution and shares and whatnot, it's an odd thing. It's an odd addiction. So now I'm looking for that next high. I'm like, okay, I've got to do another TikTok video to try to compete with the one that I just put out that's got, that's amassed a 1.5 million views. And these are the ebb and flows and the highs and lows of activism. Sometimes lightning strikes. It's obviously very rare. I've had the blessing of multiple strikes. Now, to be fair, Marineland makes it a little bit easy, what with the absurdity of the way they do things and the fact that the abuse of their animals is on display. And because I'd worked there as long as I have, I'm able to very easily take a look at, or rather dispel what some of the things people are looking at actually are. And these days, the Marineland's just deteriorated so much so that you don't have to be an expert to see how bad things are.
Well, you would think, but I imagine there'll still be people going to Marineland. There'll still be people who have the complete opposite opinion. It's still not like as horrible as it is. Well, it's been 7 years now that you've been fighting this fight, and it's still not gotten to the place where it should have been ages ago.
I'm 9 years into the fight. 9 years next month in the full revelation, so the public revelation. So that's when I blew the whistle and it actually got into print. So made the newspapers and then thereafter did the rounds. And remember, this is 2012, so going viral even then was like a different and new thing. It was weird, but it was international headlines that did catch the attention of the likes of Rogan and all these other people that did at the end of the day prove invaluable for me, because with the changing times, mainstream media always controlled the message, what with the ad dollars and whatnot. And suddenly a guy like me with social media and a phone that has a camera on it can suddenly very well become my own media empire, if you will. I mean, that's a bit of a big term, but the views that I'm talking about when I speak of some of the content I've put out and the fact that it's gone viral of late, we're talking about views to the tunes of millions. Well, in such a case, maybe the word empire isn't exactly off the mark.
Well, it'll be more than some TV shows get. Some like cable channels will get in a night as well. I mean, the amount of people that are on social media is more than how many people will watch TV news.
Well, I can assure you, based on my own personal experience in the 9 years now of my paying very careful attention to both the response on the internet and that of on cable news, or any news for that matter, is that cable news gets you nothing. I don't know who the demographic is, quite frankly. I know on social media, I can check my own analytics to see who's watching and from where. I can see, but as far as cable news goes, what I do know is there is just virtually no response. It's so strange. Or the response is such that it's not really measurable on social media, because that's not where maybe people go immediately. But for me, the gauge of whether or not something is impactful or not has everything to do with whether or not it's being discussed on social media. If it's not on the front page of Reddit, if it's not being disseminated on TikTok, if it's not on Instagram, if it's not atop all of these things and trending on Twitter, then we're talking about negligible impact, and we're talking about you're not part of the zeitgeist anymore. Like, you're not part of it. We had to break that mold, and that was one of the first and very most important things that I'd ever, I suppose, done as a would-be activist, because I don't even call myself an activist today. But for those who will call me that, then okay. In the early days, certainly the moves that I made that gave me the greatest return on investment was to invest entirely on spreading word via podcast and social media. It was to get away from mainstream media, because I'd always gotten a blurb in the third or fourth paragraph of a 5-paragraph story that had 3/4 of an image of me with the most absurd headline, but much of it was just all speculative accusations by Marineland. And then at the bottom, I would barely get a blurb in. This was not going to work for me. In this day and age, without social media and long form podcasts, I would say Marineland would be quite successful today. Would still be successful today.
Yeah. So before we get into the questions, there was 2 things I wanted to say. The first one relates to what we were talking about before we were recording about being ambitious and getting to speak to people that you never thought you'd get to speak to before. So some advice for anyone who's listening who wants to start a project or a podcast or something like this, who doesn't think you'll get someone with like someone like yourself who has like the fame that you have and the followers that you have. Here's my piece of advice: is to just be relentless. Because when was the first time I messaged you? It was maybe about a month or two ago. Oh no, it's probably longer than that. And I just kept every week I was like, hey, I'm still here. Any chance?
This morning it took you to send me the Zoom link for me to just get me to move. But listen, you did, and here we are, and that's just what it is. Yeah. And you gave example to me. You said, look, I started this endeavor, I didn't know where it would go, and suddenly I find myself speaking with people that I could have never imagined. But all I did was I had a relentless pursuit. I emailed people, I did this, I did that. Well, you and I are just the same. I did the exact same thing, and I very often mention Joe Rogan because literally that was the height of my reach, or rather that was the goal, that was the peak, and it's really what largely sustained me throughout an against all odds impossible fight. But I did just as you did. I would send him messages on Twitter. I would respond to his stuff, and finally he slipped into my DM like, "Look, if we got to get you on the podcast, come to LA." I just said, "Just say when." And within a month, I was in Los Angeles sitting in front of Joe Rogan, and my dreams suddenly began to take hold. And then we're talking 2013. My dreams of actually sustaining or lasting a sustainable fight against all odds versus Marineland started to seem palpable.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to run by you, I just want to get your opinion on this, because I had two ideas for what I was going to wear today, which is embarrassing that I even had the thought of what I was going to wear. But it was either this shirt. Hold on. I thought this other one would have been in poor taste, but I like the shirt. Do you think that's poor taste? It's got little orcas on it.
I think that you should send me that shirt. I love that shirt. So I'm like, wow, what a shirt, dude. I was impressed with your first shirt just by virtue of the fact that it's very nice. It's white. I see you haven't spilled any coffee on it yet, so you're having a nice day. And I'm still in what some may call pajamas, although they're not. It's just that I've worn this shirt for maybe, let's call it days. But on mine are swordfish. Not bad.
I did wonder. Very similar.
Yeah, swordfish. Not dolphins, not orcas, but swordfish. Not any particular reason why, but just swordfish.
Well, you've got the excuse because it's 9 o'clock where you are. It's 3 p.m. here, so you've got the excuse there, right?
I'll take it.
Yeah. So what I want to do with the order of my questions have been in chronological order. So I want to start with, how did you first move into that line of work? What happened? Why did you want to go into that line of work to start with at Marineland?
Circumstances. That was just it. It was never a dream of mine. It was never an aspiration. I never went to school in any way, shape, or form in the hopes of being directed towards any specific industry, especially that of animal welfare, animal care, anything of the sort. I had an iguana when I was a kid. I had cats. I had dogs. I loved animals in the way that most would. I felt as though I had powerful and special relationships with them, but no more than anyone else. I just wasn't, but I would call myself an animal lover, but certainly not anyone with no aspirations professionally. I went to school for audio engineering and what was called multimedia post-production back in 1999. And 6 months later, all of my otherwise expensive courses became free downloads on the internet. So I was, my skill set was obsolete fairly quickly, but because I was local to Marineland, it was, I didn't live terribly far from it. And the big city that I lived close to was about an hour and a half away, which is Toronto. The thought of getting a job there and trying to break into any audio engineering field was, at the time, seemed like it was going to be a hell of a long journey and path and an expensive one if I was to try to live up there. And then I happened upon a ad in a newspaper, a print newspaper. It said, the personal want ads, the job want ads, when it was Marineland, seeking marine mammal trainers assistants. Well, I didn't assume that my resume had much on it, but it seemed to me like, hey, I'll give it a try. It's something that for sure interests me. I mean, I can't imagine that it wouldn't to anyone. It intrigued me. And I mean, I was young enough and I thought I was aesthetically pleasing enough. And I thought I was athletic enough that at least they'd give me a bit of a look. So I gave them a call. I picked up a phone and they said, you know what, you're exactly what we're looking for. There's a major turnover rate here amongst the trainers. So you actually have quite a good chance of getting hired. I'm like, what? Turnover rate? That struck me as odd. But so I typed up and created a resume and I drove to Marineland and handed it in. And I got a phone call on the landline inviting me to an interview. I drove to the interview. I never tweeted about it because there was no social media. And that was it. Next thing I know, they're asking me some questions about my experience with wild animals. And of course, the only experience I had was owning an iguana, but nonetheless, it was still enough for them to say, okay, what size boots do you have? Next thing you know, I'm feeding orcas. And within months of that, I'm jumping off the rostrums, which is the face of the orcas. When you see those trainers jumping up in the air, you know, within months of happening upon an ad in the paper that you know, piqued my curiosity. I was swimming with orcas.
It's crazy. Did you have that? Did you have any moment where you thought, this is like unbelievable? This must be like a dream? Because when I was younger, that's what I wanted to do. I when I went on holiday once, I went to swim with dolphins at a park that would have been very similar to Marineland. I loved. Do you know the movie Free Willy? Of
course.
Loved that film. That's the tattoo I was talking about. That's from that.
Nice.
The wee killer whale.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. So the older trainer in that film gives the main character a wee wooden Indian carving, Native American carving, I should say, of a killer whale. And I always just thought that was really cool. So I just got my tattoo guy to just do a 2D, like one way of it.
Yeah, very cool.
So that was always like a dream of mine, is I wanted to do that. Did you feel that when you started doing this? Did it feel like crazy?
It felt to me like I had a sense of belonging, because here was exactly things that I was good at doing and I enjoyed doing. There were a few days that I went to work in anticipation of having a bad day. Not to say that there aren't some very bad days. There were like nightmarish days, but obviously they were something I could tolerate in light of the good days. And it just seemed for me like a really perfect fit. I'll say it on day one, despite the fact that I didn't love the conditions that the animals were living, but who was I to speak to them, of them? This was a celebrated industry. This is a place that was wildly successful. I'm assuming the professionals know what the hell they're doing. I'm just there to scrub buckets at least, right? I'm day one. What do I know what I'm doing? But I do recall in that moment, as I'm feeding Candu, a 12,000 to 15,000 pound bull orca, and I'm putting fish into his mouth. And I remember just being like, and one of the senior trainers says, do you want to touch him? And I still to this day cannot tell you what it felt like to just look over at the trainer who's like, go ahead and touch him. I mean, just to be told that I could be within a certain proximity of this animal, never mind feed him, and then to be told to touch him. That feeling of touching a whale for the very first time is one very few people in the world will ever do. Number two, in the context, it's strange now, but in retrospect, this was powerful, man. This was really powerful. This is where I was like, I'm not going anywhere. This is it. This is it. Yeah. And then I guess you could say it was a dream job. I wouldn't have known it, but I fell ass backwards into what I felt like a job that I had the most belonging in. And I felt most comfortable as myself, oddly, in. I was really able to. It's a strange place to work. Marineland is exceptionally strange, but the industry itself is a strange place to work. You've got really young, dynamic people, and it's fun. And and again, I don't want to stress the fun part, but when you're young, it's a great place. I mean, shit, you're half a rock star. You go to the bars later, everyone's got the drinks for you covered. You're bringing your friends sometimes after hours for shits and giggles to go hang out with dolphins and whales. It's a mom and pop joint. It's not some big corporation. So, I mean, you became family with the family. It was just said and done. It was just, it quite literally was that. It's a mom and pop joint just that got wildly successful and, purported to be major employers of the area and to be major this, major that. But at the end of the day, it really was quite a small operation. So when you got into it, it did feel like sort of family.
And so then you were training walruses, and Smooshi comes into the story. For anyone that won't know, what happened with Smooshi and her imprinting on you?
So she came to us at approximately 2 years of age, which in my experience, was quite old for us to receive captive walruses. So normally the babies, they bring them to you very young. And so 2 walruses were delivered to us. Now, when we assess their health, we have to put a needle in their spine and draw some blood to try to get an assessment, send it to a laboratory. Well, we were doing that on one of the 2, so not Smooshi, in fact, the other one. And while we were wrestling her down, so bear in mind, she's about, a little over 200 pounds at that point. But it still takes 4 or 5 guys, humans, of great proportions to try to hold these animals down, because despite the fact that they may only weigh 200 pounds, it's 200 pounds of muscle you've not known. So it does take quite a crew to hold them down. While we were doing this and trying to hold down the one walrus while we were trying to draw blood from her, Smooshi was becoming quite agitated, and her 200 pounds was becoming quite disruptive, trying to climb us and the scene and whatnot. So I elected to abandon myself as a weight on the one walrus and try to coerce her to get away from the scene. But in doing so, and anomalously, as explained by science and anyone who's observed this, in that moment when I put my hands in front of her face to try to calm her, I imprinted on her. She opened her nostrils and she took. It's as if she absorbed my information. So everything about me, she sort of downloaded onto her brain. Sound of my voice, what I look like, what I smell like, which is all survival keys that calves and moms have. It's an evolutionary tool so that animals can recognize each other in herds of thousands and tens of thousands, even. Right? You've got a mother and calf that need to be bonded and to stay and protect. And to be protected. So, this imprint is something that happens. What's odd is that it happened at 2 years of age, and that it happened on a human to a walrus.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened.
It's crazy. So then there must have came some moments, or one moment, where you decided what was happening was wrong and you didn't want to be a part of it. Was there one moment, or was it a combination of various moments?
It was several moments over a period of several years, of several varying degrees of resolve at my end of what it is that I was going to do about it. When it ultimately came to my quitting, there were a bunch of things that had to have happened for me to be able to quit, or to allow myself to leave in good conscience. And over a long period of time, I managed to fulfill those things, which was so to allow for Smooshi to be fed by other trainers with the confidence that she's not going to die. And that took some time. Okay, I had to be weaned off her. So I couldn't quit in those circumstances. Yes, I was documenting evidence amidst a period of time in the hopes that if things got ugly, I would reveal them. I can't explain why I was doing these things. I didn't have a specific plan involved. I can't tell you why it is we do the things we do. I can't explain why it is my journey has led me the way that it has, or what the motivations of my decision-making are. I can only tell you what has become and where we are today. But here I was taking photographs and doing all the things I had to do for what would eventually be a moment where I could leave. And that moment came when I walked in one morning, and it was amidst a period where the conditions were really, really foul. And the resolve of Marineland, which even today is a continued practice, cruel and continued practice, is they have a archaic water disinfection system that just does not work. And so they just resolved to put more and more chlorine in it to try to fix the water. The issue with that is, as you would know, is the effect on humans, just as well as animals, is awful. And so animals started to, in some cases, have their eyes bleed, fall out, patches of fur fall out. We had some animals die amidst this period, skin flaking off, this and that. All very awful. So I'd walked in one morning. It was just shortly before the park was set to open, only weeks before. And as I opened the door, I walked in. The smell and the pungence of the chlorine was such that I got an immediate headache. It felt as if it punched me in the head. I looked over at my manager. I said, I can't do this no more. And then he looked at me and he said, sometimes, and this is a weird one, but it did prove to be quite motivational. He said, you know what I like about you, Philly? The more shit we throw at you, the more you take it and keep coming back. When I thought, that's the end. If I'm going to keep taking shit and keep coming back, then it's going to be against Marineland. It's not going to be for them.
Yeah.
And that was it. I pushed the button. I'd already had a 2-week notice set in my phone. I just needed the courage to push the buttons, and that was it. I pushed the button. I CC'd everyone. My manager was sitting across from me. He's got the email in real time. 2 weeks, and it didn't take. I left within days. I didn't have to stay any 2 weeks. I did what I could to do what I could to make sure in my conscience that I was leaving the place in as best as hands as I could. And then within months of that is when the whistleblowing came, because Marineland couldn't make good with a number of the deals that we had, which again, like I'd stressed earlier, there was a number of things that had to happen in order for me to leave. One of which was I had to be readily available, and both I was willing, but Marineland had to be willing and accepting of having me come back should any problems with Smooshi's health arise. Well, health issues did come, and one day I decided to show unannounced, and Marineland tried to keep me out of the park. I got in. I saw Smooshi. She was I would describe her as possibly near death. I don't say that very often. And and so the vet saw me, and she looked at me. She says, "We weren't allowed to tell you. Sorry." So we got medication to her. We got fish. We got water. We hydrated. We did all these things. I snapped a photo, and that's when I elected. Months at this point, weeks after, almost months, the weeks after quitting, that I was now going to blow the whistle on Marineland, and that time was against Smooshi and the other animals. And if I didn't stick my neck out and put my name and face to all of the stories that would emerge over time, because again, it wasn't just me. In the end, it would be in excess of 12 whistleblowers. It was a number of us that would eventually come out. I was one of the first, but then regardless, the first story that did come out included 7 other whistleblowers, 6 others, nonetheless. And that was it. And then life changed drastically from that moment.
Oh yeah. So then you started this mammoth campaign of 9 years to have Smooshi moved from that facility to a safer one where you could see her. And now Marineland are suing you for, I think the original sum was $1.5 million. Is that still the case now, or has that changed?
So they made amendments to the claim, and they had said something to the tune of reducing damages to $1. And I don't know, it was a very confusing period when they were doing these amendments. Nonetheless, they've changed it. It's now like 1.273. I don't know what it is. Whatever the price is, it always just continues to put a smile on my face, because I mean, frankly, the best advice I ever got to my lawyer, because I get myself into a little bit of trouble, but he did say to me, "Well, you're already sued for 1.5 million. Why not make it 3, 5, 10?" I'm like, I like that, man. If I could never pay $1.5 million. It's absurd to suggest that I even have a fraction of that. We may as well make it 10. So yeah, they sued me for $1.5 million for plotting to steal Smooshi the walrus.
And even sent the police to your house, like you were saying there.
Oh, it's not just that. They've sent goons, tough guys to my house. The owner himself would drive around with a gun and would provide me with threats. The police were here. They caught him. I say caught him. They saw him with their cameras drive by no less than a dozen times. But despite the fact he was coming by repeatedly and driving very slowly by the house and whatnot, they said that didn't constitute harassment. Okay, fair enough. Protect yourself is the best advice I can give you out there. Don't wait on the police to somehow try to rationalize situations that they're not going to understand. An old rich man can be dangerous. He can be, despite the fact that he pays the city large sums in taxes and provides the police officers with free admissions to Marineland. He can still be a dangerous man.
Yeah, that almost makes him dangerous if he has all that, or if he does all that.
I understand why the public enjoy their private tours. I used to tour them.
Do you have any sympathy for people who go to these parks now, even with all this information out there?
Honestly, this is going to sound maybe a little bit, but the sympathy I have for them is that they're being left behind in a world that's moving forward. And I'm not just meaning that in this particular subject. I mean, anyone that can rationalize going to Marineland is definitely lagging behind in a far other ethical issues. And, so I empathize with them that they are of the sort that I don't imagine that I don't imagine are that the future is not going to be kind to just some people that allow for and endorse and are blind to certain things. It's just not. It's just not. You know, the shame of it all is they just don't know it themselves. You know, you almost want to say to them, hey, give your head a shake. If you think this is okay, what else do you think is okay going on in the world? Like, come on. So I empathize that their route to wherever it is that you have to go in life to hopefully sleep at night on the eve of your death. I hope that they can get there faster than what I imagine it's going to take, because that's a hell of a lonely and introspective place at the end of your life when you start realizing that you were wrong about a lot of things.
Yeah. But you have had some success that are shown in the documentary. Canada's now banned the captivity of dolphins, porpoises, and whales. How did that feel, having that success, having something to show for all this campaigning and effort?
This is what is so strange, and I don't know if it's unique to me or not, but I haven't yet felt an iota of pride. I haven't yet felt an iota of a fiber of celebratory sentiment. Anytime I allow myself, even for a moment, to relax amidst all this, I get flooded with anxiety and emotion like you wouldn't believe, because I start to allow myself to believe maybe it's almost over. You know, maybe it's because I'm still amidst a nightmare and a mission. I'm very steadfastly focused on what it is that I want, and I want that walrus and her baby moved. They're dying on display right now, and it's awful. Smooshi is the last surviving walrus, if not for the baby that they forced her to have. I mean, it really is just a very disgusting and very, 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 very dark story, to the tune of far darker than anyone even knows, despite the documentary and everything else. You know, that was a very romantic piece. It could very well have been made a lot darker. And not to suggest that that's a criticism of it. I like the story that's told, but some of the things that are overlooked were done in such a way that it steers the story in a much darker place. But that's how I feel more than not. Is I'm looking for the relief of one day being free of having to fight Marineland, of having to defend against Marineland. All these laws and everything else, they're great. And yes, they're all huge milestone and stepping stones to what it is that I want. But I won't allow myself to relax until I get it. Like, I'm staying hungry. I drive a 2009 truck. That's not going to change for a long time.
Is there any, when the time comes when hopefully that we get Smooshi out of that facility, do you stop there, or is there more to be done?
Well, so ultimately it becomes a question of what concessions I'd be willing to make with Marineland, because that doesn't happen without us resolving our legal dispute. So that's a concession I've been offering Marineland for a long time, is I'll stop campaigning against you. It's not that I want to walk away on account of the fact that I'll be giving up on other animals. That's not the case. I want to think that my work here is done. We've passed rigorous laws. We've inspired new ones. I'm not the animals at Marineland I bring a lot of attention to. I don't have to be the one bringing a lot of attention to, but I am. And again, I'm doing so consciously in Marineland's face, saying, you should have dealt with me a long time ago. On account of the fact that you haven't, I'm now going to destroy you. Because you didn't make a decision that would have been financially prudent long ago, I'm going to directly make your refusal to move those walruses cost you. So that's my bargaining chip. They want my silence, not me to sign NDAs. They want me this, they want me that. Well, I'm willing to not trespass, if you will, around that park. I don't care to ever have to go back. I mean, is it a dream of mine to go and actually get some of the whales out of there? Yeah. Would it be a concession I would take if they move the walrus that I would agree to never go back there? Yeah. Would I stop tweeting about them? Conceivably. Would I not destroy them in a book? I don't know. But there are concessions I'd be willing to make. But the idea that the fight for Marineland's animals suddenly stops, no. Does it become less impactful with me gone? It doesn't have to. But why does it have to be me doing the things that I do? The images that are provided by me are provided by people that paid admissions to go into Marineland. Some of the overhead footages that you see that are from helicopters or drones, I don't know. They're given to me anonymously, but people that have those capabilities are just as well free to produce those things themselves and have those videos go viral, and they can just as well be spokesperson on TV. I did it because I do have a mission, and I'm still on that path. So I don't know. I don't know what, we haven't had that conversation seriously enough. But am I willing to give things up? I mean, quite frankly, at this point, I feel like, there's a time to declare victory. Some people do it like halfway on their journey. They relax. I can just tell by being conscious of myself and how it is that I'm going, that I'm not going to be satisfied until they're absolutely destroyed. I am a nightmare for them. They don't want that. Look, it's worked. It's working. So I have to be dangerous and effective. And it's because I've weaponized their lawsuit. If we were to eliminate the fact that they were suing me and lying about me and doing all these things now, and I got the objective of getting my animal out before her imminent death. Yeah, okay, I'm satisfied to walk. Sure. Maybe. But I'm not going to call that giving up. That's the moment I would be quite prideful, because I have had an objective. And while I appreciate a lot of everyone watching it, it's not their mission. This is my mission. Like, I appreciate the eyes that we managed to get on the animals. I appreciate the support. I appreciate the outcries. I appreciate the hate, but this is entirely on my shoulders. All I'm doing is showing what is obvious. Anyone's capable of doing that. And now enough people know it, that there's enough momentum. I could probably moonwalk out of this thing and be forgotten about very quickly. And if Marineland had done this some time ago, it would be the case. People would still be talking about the animals, perhaps not to the magnitude. Perhaps what would be spoken about wouldn't be quite as articulate, because not a lot of people have the experience I have that I've accrued in the last 10 years, largely thankful to Marineland, because now because I've been spreading word so often, I've become quite good at it. And all of this could have been done. But no, instead we've got documentaries, The Walrus and the Whistleblower, which you can now watch, I believe, if you get Amazon Prime UK in Scotland or wherever the listeners are. We've got documentaries now. We've got a free Kiska campaign that is virtual as we speak. It's gone not virtual, rather it's gone viral as we speak. So I don't know. I feel like Marineland could have done themselves a favor long ago, and if they still want to do themselves a favor, I mean, if I was willing long ago to make concessions, it's easier now. I mean, A, she's closer to death. B, so are they. So let's end this fucking thing.
Yeah. And also, just while what you mentioned there of the documentary and the Save Kisa campaign, I'll link everything in the show notes. So we'll link the Save Smooshi campaign, where people can donate, where people can help, your social medias and everything like that. You mentioned there that Smooshi had a baby. And so that was a crazy event to have happened. Why is that?
Well, because the math doesn't quite add up, because the last male that died at Marineland died sort of mathematically impossibly close to when Smooshi would have been where the baby would have been conceived. So it should be noted that Marineland has never had successful walrus conception or birth of any sort. It's a very difficult thing to achieve in captive settings, in fact, except for they're quite successful in it in Belgium and in Germany. And what we do know is they're experts at it. They're experts at insemination, etc. Well, we know that I know with absolute certainty and without a doubt, without question, that people from Belgium, trainers, were down at Marineland, and they were supposed to take Smooshi and bring her back to Belgium. Now, I've had a whistleblower come out and tell me that there was a lot of manipulation going on between the Belgian vets and Smooshi, things that she did not enjoy. And the person that I spoke to couldn't elaborate on exactly what was happening. But shortly thereafter, it was announced that she was pregnant. So if you do the math that a necropsy is being performed and then the sperm is being extrapolated, because that's what we do with all our, that's what we did with the whales and most of some of the other species of animals, is when you do a necropsy, which is the equivalent of an autopsy for humans, you keep the sperm and you freeze it. Is it conceivable that Marineland inseminated Smooshi? I don't see any other way that there would be a successful birth there. I don't see how else it could be. If I'm wrong, okay, so then they hit a 1 in a million. If the whistleblower who told me this information, having not exactly known what was happening, but when you tie it together, it becomes quite evident that you've got experts from a facility that are experts at making walruses pregnant. And the only reason that the export was canceled was by virtue of COVID. So these animals were stuck there. And that, I'm told, actually a contract, or Marineland did pull some last second demand for extra money. And so it nullified the contract. But Smooshi ultimately did not leave and then gave birth at the park. The baby and Smooshi were immediately separated at birth. And now that baby's performing. They got the baby chasing. They got the baby chasing trainers around on stage for fish in 90-degree sun, waving like this to the people while it's gobbling fish. It's just awful. It's just awful.
Yeah. And there's a part in the documentary where you're trying to get the bill passed to make it to ban the captivity of whales, dolphins, and porpoises. And there's a part when the senators are talking about when you used drugs that were intended for the animals. And do you think that was purely just to smear your character over this? And one more question: do you think they are, as Marineland tried to do the same thing with, say, your recreational use of cannabis? Even though I'm assuming it's legal there, I'm sure, right?
Legal, yeah. No, we're no longer banditos. This is my weapon of choice. That's my delivery method of choice. I am an avid cannabis smoker, and if not for my battle for marine mammals in Canada, I think I would very well be fighting for or advocating for cannabis use. But for that matter, it's legal now, so it would have been wasted energy. In fact, both bills passed at the same time. In fact, I was in the Senate when the bills were passing simultaneously, so it was kind of It was momentous for me because I was able to celebrate with lawyers by lighting up a little bit. But they never made a specific note of my cannabis use as a problem, although they did mention that I was like, a drug abuser and whatnot. And so the whole premise of what they did when they accused me of stealing the drugs is it was a cover for the fact that the veterinarians were providing controlled drugs to myself, other employees, the owner himself, John Holler. He was actually consuming some that were made for animals only. Although it should be noted that the drugs that animals take, they're all human drugs. And so specifically what we're talking about is Valium, is that, I had been prescribed Valium for a number of years from my doctors, and I was taking it to help me sleep at night because I suffer from depression and stuff. These were very dark years of my life. Near the end there, of course, I wasn't exactly conscious of it. I was just living life on pills. That's what becomes. You're not like, oh, wait, you're depressed because your life sucks because you're surrounded by misery. You're just like, oh, more pills, right? Not to suggest that I was an abuser. It's just that you're just not conscious sometimes of what it is that of how you're operating because you're compromised a little bit, right? Your operating system is compromised. Well, mine was for a number of years. And it actually explains why I transitioned from, antipsychotic meds to marijuana use. It actually is part of the story. But nonetheless, Marineland's veterinarians were giving this. There was investigations by the College of Veterinarians. They, of course, will never actually punish members of their own sort of faculty, right? So, but nonetheless, the investigations, because there was investigations happening, Marineland thought to smear me, and they put it in the actual claim. But we don't have to defend against that anymore because obviously, as Marineland amended their statement of claim over time, they very quickly but quietly eliminated that because any more attention to that would bring me to speak and offer clarity. So you ask a question, I offer the perspective and the truth of why it is. So it just became evident that this was a subject they no longer wanted to be touched on. And so they used it to smear me and to defend that I was a thief, that I was stealing drugs and whatnot. But at the end of the day, that was a very convenient, as all of their accusations are, to hide their crimes, which at the end of the day is, the vets should not be giving out controlled drugs. And while they were not being malicious, they had good intentions. It was really, I only really got the drugs personally, those specific ones, because I was just out of a prescription. It was just a question of if they would give me 4 or 5 tabs at a time, and that would last me almost a month because I would take half a tab. I mean, we're not talking. Their stories is always quite romantic and fantastical. But truth be told, when they made the accusations, and this was some months after I'd left, I provided them back as evidence, like provided to my lawyer, and then we made an exchange, but it was all noted and documented that I still had them. I still actually had in excess of the drugs that they were giving me because, well, I wasn't an abuser. I used it because it helped me sleep at night when I couldn't. I was far more dangerous to myself and life in general on no sleep than I was waking up feeling like a bag of shit because I took Valium the night before. But, you know, the vets were trying to help me, just as they were trying to help everyone. I mean, when they were giving out antibiotics, it wasn't because they wanted to kill you. It's because you were sick. Here's 10 days worth of antibiotics. Spare yourself going to the fucking doctor. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on this shit and throw it out all the time. Here you are, Sally. Get well soon, you know?
Yeah. Was getting that bill passed your biggest achievement thus far, do you think? No.
I mean, on paper, you might say, oh, that's the one that yielded the, you know, it's in the history books, if you will. So that's the one where, okay, in the Canadian legislature, it'll be legislation that will be known that in our history, I will have had hand in helping create and pass something. That's cool. For me, the most noted success is Marineland's demise. Is the fact that this was a burgeoning business. This was largely a wildly, and I don't even know that word properly summarizes just the extent of how successful Marineland was in this area. But the fact that we took that from them and their iconic jingle now works for us. Like, you know, it's catchy. Everyone loves Marineland. Well, now it's everyone hates Marineland. You know, it's like that when that jingle comes up, it used to arouse like a positive sentiment, and you know, the kids would be getting out of school and get ready for summer and all this stuff. You know, everybody, when that song comes on, it filled you with joy. I mean, they conditioned an entire country and regions and upon regions and legions of people to feel like that, to be conditioned to feel how much they loved Marineland. That's gone. And so the fact that we killed the spirit of Marineland, that's the biggest achievement. That was the beast. The rest are all stepping stones towards what was the ultimate goal, which is to eradicate it. I want it gone. Yeah. You'll know when I'm celebrating. I've yet to. You'll know when I do. I've used to smile. I used to party. I used to be quite happy. Right now, lines on my face and the skinny Phil. You'll see a different version of Phil one day, jumping off some stage at some music festival. You'll be like, oh, fucker's happy again. Here we go. So you'll know when I'm celebrating.
Right. I think we all look forward to seeing that.
Me too.
Is there any scenario where these sea parks or zoos are acceptable, do you think?
No, not anymore.
No,
they're at this point, they're holding on by the skin of their teeth, looking at what is the best form of transition to something else. They themselves don't precisely know. You can see the marketing campaigns have entirely changed. The focus of their marketing has changed. The emphasis of the investments of their parks have changed. Board members and entirety of ownerships have changed multiple times. This is something that is spiraling out of control, and the interest in North America is gone. So it becomes a question of sustaining until transitioning. Now, that's not to say that it's not wildly successful in other parts of the world. China, as we speak, are building parks in droves, and the demand for animals are such that you know, a lot of animals are still being captured from the wild. But there will be a demand for already captive animals. My guess is at some point, SeaWorld probably starts to partner and ship towards China and other places. That's going to be an element of great controversy. So my hope is that there's going to be a whale sanctuary that once erected here in North America, or on both the East and West Coast, with plans already and shovels in the ground on the East Coast. But that's more suitable for beluga whales, possibly orcas. But, you know, there's plans for other ones. In the next 30 or 40 years, this will exist. We'll have sanctuaries for whales. So it becomes a question of whether or not they're built fast enough, and whether or not the zoo industry is going to, you know, work side by side or fight. So it does become a question of time. But no, these parks don't stand a chance. We're getting those whales. It's just a question of whether they become whether they retire in sanctuaries or if they get spread out in parks. It becomes a question of profit, because sanctuary is not going to be in a position to pay for whales, and those are assets. They're going to want money. So unless somehow we can incentivize places like SeaWorld and Marineland to give, to partner with these sanctuaries, it's just going to be an uphill battle. It's going to be a war for those whales for sure.
Yeah. What would you say to anyone who's considering going to Marineland now?
Spare yourself the $55 to $100. Save your soul. Or if you do go there and you feel uncomfortable, then do something about it. Take pictures. Talk about it. You don't need to be an expert. You don't need to have a blue check mark on Twitter to speak your truth. And at this point, nobody can't help but see what level of suffering is happening there. So what I would like for those people to advocate for those animals. You paid to help their suffering, to help further their suffering. Now make a contribution equally to make amends for that. So do something. I'm not saying donate to SaveSmooshi.com, the same price as admission. So if you want to, feel free. That might make you feel better. It would certainly help me. But do something. Tweet about it. Talk about it. Friends don't let friends go to Marineland after they find out that it's shit. So spread the word. But yeah, by all means, if you're going to waste your money and go there, at least don't lie to yourself at the end of the day. If you convince yourself you had a good time, then maybe you need to take a little more introspective look at what ethics you're comprised of, because there's far too gray a line in some of those parameters. Yeah.
So there's two questions I wanted to ask that are probably the darkest, but I want people to. I know the answers broadly, but that I want people to kind of hear, so that because the answers to these questions hit home for me. So the first one is, how many deaths since you left Marineland has there been of animals? And the second is, what do they do when they die?
So it's difficult to have an accurate accounting of how many animals have died, because Marineland tries to the best of their abilities, and they are successful in burying animals very secretly and quietly overnight. And while that's a little easier to identify when the animals are older, it's not when they're newly born. And so, with the banning of the breeding of whales, that's why this year you're seeing that there's so significantly more deaths. But yeah, the animal deaths are high. So what I can absolutely say is all of the walruses died except for Smooshi, and now she has her baby. So that would have been, I believe, 6 or 7 walruses. I don't want to get it wrong because of my timeline, but that's at a minimum, let's say 6 walruses. And then thereafter, we go over to belugas. Well, we know 11 have died in the past year alone. So if we're talking about the decade, on average, 5 dying, 4 to 5 a year, 3 to 7 in some cases, but let's call it 4 just to be conservative, 4 a year. You're looking at 50 dead whales, probably 60. And then if we go into like bears, deer, elk, and the rest of what happens there, that number very quickly escalates into the hundreds. But as far as marine, the specific animals that I helped to legislate to protect, probably in excess of 50 have died.
And this is needless.
More than that. Wait, there's seals too.
Go on.
A lot of seals have died, and sea lions. In excess of 50 have died.
And this is needless because their life expectancy in the wild would have been a whole lot longer than it would be in captivity, right?
And beyond that, much of the animals I just told you about live outside of the public view. They're not even on display. The seals are excess animals that live in a warehouse. Some of the sea lions that don't perform because they're too old, or they've gone blind, or they're not doing well. They never see the light of day. They're just hidden in the back, and they're just fed fish every day on drugs and made to live until the last day of their life, and that's it. It's awful. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, there's a seal there that you will never see, that you have never seen. Her name is Delphine. She may have performed 100 times over her lifetime being at Marineland now, which will have been easily about 20 years. She's blind. She's a gray seal. She's really old. She's suffering from some sores and everything. She's got his skin issues right now. They've got her on drugs. She just lives there. She just lives in the warehouse. She's just a seal that lives in a warehouse and suffers from its awful conditions. She's the only gray seal, so she's the only one of her species. Now, typically they don't hang out very often, but nonetheless, you don't even know about that animal. Why does Marineland have that animal? It doesn't make any sense. But you know, there was a time when the owner, he was a hoarder. He was a noted hoarder, and he kept animals, he bred animals. He didn't care how sick they were. In fact, in some strange cases, he liked to have animals that were compromised on display because he said, and I quote, "They're unique." So this is what we were up against, and it's a new day and age with the owner being gone. But the unfortunate reality is, since he's been gone, the animal deaths appear to have been accelerating. But that has everything to do with a failing water system that we learned just last week that Marineland's been charged by the province and forced to fix. So whether they do or not, I don't know. But we do know yesterday a criminal complaint was made against Marineland, and that's at the provincial level. I'm assuming very soon there will be another one at the federal level. And you know, with the multi-platform assault that Marineland's having, with all the viral videos of the animal suffering happening right now, they're in really some deep trouble. We really have them where we want them, but you know, it's unfortunate because what we really want is for the cessation of animal suffering.
Do you find it difficult to maintain this frustration, maintain this fight? Because it's been 9 years. Has there ever been like a small part of you that's thought, maybe I should just give up? Because it must be taking its toll. Yes,
it takes its toll. And I know it from the people that see me or the people that used to know me. And I would say, like, Phil, this is, you know, this is not conversations I have very often. It seems my world's become significantly smaller as a both resulting consequence of this. But it took this level of sort of near obsession for justice and truth for this to be effective. But it encompassed the entirety of my life. What becomes of my life after this, I don't know. Because I've only ever known in the last 10 years a steadfast focus of, in every which way, shape, or form that I can, to debilitate Marineland in every which weakness that I know that they have. It's made me an effective tool in a very niche thing, a very niche skill set. But at no point did I think I want to quit. No, this is, if this is the equivalent of a pursuit in football for the big cup, or in North America, if it's the Stanley Cup in hockey, that's what I want. And if this is what a career span is in what would be a relative to that of a professional athlete, okay, that seems about right. I mean, I prepare for court. I prepare for a lot of things, much like a UFC fighter will prepare. I work out. I try to run. I've suffered an injury recently that set me back, but nonetheless, I try to stay physically fit. I get angry. I get pumped up. I listen to loud music. So I function different. I have a different motherboard, and it's managed to be effective when I apply it to this. What becomes after, I don't know, but I'm not satisfied, nor have I any inclination to quit. None. That's up to them. That's in their court. I made promises. When I make a promise, I keep it. I made a promise to those animals. This doesn't end. This doesn't end until they're fucked. Well, they're fucked, but I made a promise to Smooshi that I'm coming to get her. So I've got two simultaneous promises going. So I got to get her out of there.
Yeah. And so there's a scene in the documentary where you're cooking steaks, and you mentioned that some people had said that it's hypocritical for you to eat meat and also advocate for animal welfare. So I'm not so sure that that's the case. I would say if you were advocating for animal welfare, maybe the thing that you do with regards to eating meat is making sure you're not eating meat that's factory farmed or that causes animal harm. Maybe I don't know if that's exclusive, that you have to advocate for animal welfare, then that means you can't eat meat.
Well, it should be noted that I'm not, and I'm not advocating for animal welfare in the broadest sense of the term. And I'm not saying that this is something that I somehow endorse cruelty. That's not what I'm saying. But I don't feel, on account of the fact that, based on my experience, I'm revealing things that I believed to be wrong that is resonating with and in a very specific case. And we're talking about marine mammal captivity. And well, frankly, it's specifically with regards to Marineland's treatment of animals. I don't know that makes me a spokesperson for factory farming. I just don't know that it does. Now, the fact that I grew up in a family of, my father was a hunter, but I grew up on meat and potatoes. My body functions best, my mind too. I have to mention that when I eat meat, I am at my most effective, steak specifically. But the fact that I have to defend my diet is just a peculiar one. But having said that, there is a level of hypocrisy in it, and I accept that. I look at my hypocrisy. I don't need to hear it from someone that doesn't. And those tend to be the people that are the most vocal, are the people that don't look at themselves. So when I turn around and I outright, and you may have noted in the documentary, I say, I know there's hypocrisy in this. I admit it. There's absolutely hypocrisy, and there's ignorance in all of this. I'm just as guilty on the other side of other people's campaign for animal welfare as other people who are on the other side of mine. But that just doesn't make me a spokesperson for factory farming. It just doesn't. So I eat steak. In fact, I had one yesterday, and I'm probably going to eat another one shortly after the end of this this podcast.
Yeah. I've got a few more questions. I want to be sympathetic to your time. So do you think broadly, the thing I found about a documentary that kind of hit me the most is when you're talking about like what all you want is for Smooshi to be moved from that facility to another facility. If Marineland does that, it's all over. Do you think, it just seems ridiculous that they wouldn't do that, but do you think the reason they're not is because if they move Smooshi, it's almost like an admission of guilt for them?
Exactly.
Do you think that's, yeah, okay.
This is promise. So when the owner died, John Holler passed away a couple of years ago. He was very clear and gave very concise, precise instructions to the lawyer who's now operating within those parameters to never allow me to ever be with that animal. And so the lawyer sees that as a cash grab, any opportunity that he has to both defend against a lawsuit that's bogus, but that amount to some pretty impressive billable hours for him. He's just there to take as much money and squeeze as much money out as he can on the promise of a vengeance promise. So good on him for being an unethical piece of shit. I hope one day, legitimately, I hope one day he's got the stones to make good. And I hope that when this is all said and done, he and I can maybe square up in the middle of a fighting ring of sorts, an arena, and we can fight, and it can be sanctioned, and it would be wonderful, and we could pay admissions, and we could both put up a sizable amount of money and make it go to charity. But I have to say, because I do believe that man to be personally responsible for a number of deaths and all of the lies of Marineland, and I think that if I am Marineland's karma, then he should expect that he is also going to have to atone for his abuse. And so I use the fighting thing as I'm half joking. And Jesse's a very big man, but David and Goliath's story, wouldn't it just be fitting that at the end I get to give a fucking free nap out to Marineland's abusive lawyer? Wouldn't that be something? Aye.
That's what people want to see. They don't want to see YouTube stars in the ring. They want to see that.
That, man. Let's go. Give me that chance.
Yeah. And so bringing us up to today, there's a video that went viral of Kiska, the orca, in her tank, just kind of floating. It's very, very horrible. But the thing I was wondering is, so Canada have banned the captivity of whales. So what does it mean to say that they're grandfathered by the law to still have Kiska in captivity?
So what it means is you've got property laws at the end of in our that are protected, and they take precedence over new laws that would suddenly make it such that your assets are being seized. I mean, can you imagine a law that would pass that suddenly someone's coming to your house and taking what has always and historically been deemed as property? It's just not how it works. So in the case of the new legislation, the animals are, it gives the animals some rights. It does give them a bit of a voice in the actual piece of literature, because if they were to be moved, it has to be in the interests of the animals. So it's actually quite a historic piece, quite progressive. But because animals today are deemed property, all of Marineland's animals were grandfathered in. Now they're not able to breed, and some of the law does apply to them present day, but unfortunately the seizing of their animals is not one. Although there are some laws coming in the near future that, now not near future enough, but that could conceivably offer animal protections where suddenly they can be seized. And that would be, I mean, that would be something. But that's not something that's not a conversation that won't happen in the legislation until the spring. So Kiska doesn't have that time, and neither does Smooshi, and neither does any of the animals. So, I'm looking for international outcry and a resolve now. I think we're looking at a mission that needs the attention of the world, needs major funding, but it needs something done, because I don't know a single person that could be satisfied watching this animal die and then simply allowing for that to happen. I just don't know how anyone can't even so much as make a small contribution or a retweet or whatnot to try to make something happen. But I just don't see how millions of people can't change the fate of these animals. I keep saying it, but just because Marineland's dead doesn't mean that the whales have to die.
Yeah. And obviously we've mentioned that this will be taking a toll on you, and you say like you go running and listening to loud music and stuff like that. Is there anything else that you do to stay healthy in mind and body?
I think that I have a great tolerance for suffering. And I think mostly I just take it well. I don't know that I consciously cope. I know that sometimes I cry, maybe more often than I should. I know sometimes my behavior can be erratic. I know sometimes I can be irrational for a moment. It takes me a long time to remind myself of the long game. So whereas you say, what do you do to stay mentally healthy? I would say, I don't know. I don't know exactly. I do know that when I run, now I haven't been able to actually run in excess of 10 months now. The voices in my head changed, and I liked that. When I was working every day, I was a mailman. That's 17 kilometers a day. That's quite a lot of walking. The voices in my head changed. I know that when I eat a diet more consciously that has less bread and carbs and is more in my case red meat focused, I know I physically am more inclined to get off the couch than to lay there. I know that my sleep has always been my enemy, my lack thereof, but that's been largely addressed. I would say that with my strategic use of cannabis, I can just about nail down 5 to 6 hours a night, and that's very important for me. That's gone a long ways, and I would say my mental suffering in the past was exacerbated with lack of sleep quite a bit. But no, I don't know that I'm an example of someone who consciously did anything other than continue to sort of not resist. And that's just what I've done. I think much of our own mental suffering is that of resisting things we can't change, or trying to change things we can't, or resisting change we can't. And I think that acceptance goes a long ways. And I think that I broke the barrier of acceptance a long time ago of, I don't care what becomes of me. I don't know how I'll be spit out once I'm chewed up, but the journey of being chewed will be such that I will make sure that I am a diamond to their fucking teeth, So I don't know, maybe in the future I'll have a TED talk of how I overcame it, but that journey starts once I start to overcome it. I'm still, I don't know. I'm not there.
What do you want your legacy to be? Have you ever thought about that? What people will remember you for?
Yes. It changes every day, it seems. I want to be the guy who proved everyone wrong. Most notably, the people who think I did this for myself. The people that call me selfish, that say that I'm doing this for attention, that you know what? I'm doing what I'm doing in the way that I'm doing, my way, because it's effective. And every time I have that microphone, I may say me, and I, but that's because I need that microphone. The microphone elsewhere is less effective. I always bring attention to those animals. I always have. It's been my focus since day one. It's what fuels me. I would not have gone the length of this journey if not for the fact that this was very genuine. And so for me, the legacy will be such that even the people that hated me, because maybe perhaps, I don't know why, I don't want to rationalize why, but I want even the supporters to be like, he ducked out. He did what he came out to do. And then we never heard from him again. I may have blue check marks around all my Twitters and Instagrams and shit, but that don't mean I got to tweet. That don't mean I got to share my life. it takes a toll to share your life. I have people that drive in front of my house because they see that it's in the documentary. I have people pull over to the side of the road that I've not spoken to in 10 years, and they show up and they want to sit down with me for hours of my time suddenly. Great, but also not. Yeah. I'm 44. I don't have children. It was never in the plans, but those plans got stripped away from me fairly quickly too. I've got a lot of resolve and resolution on my personal life and focus to sort of redream, but that doesn't have to be shared with the rest of the world. The first half of this journey did. So I do want at the end, it's not that I want my legacy to be known as someone who ducked out. I want it to be known that I was genuine, that I was real. I wasn't some disgruntled ex-employee with an axe to grind. I gave a shit about those animals, and I hope that at the end that's no longer in dispute.
Yeah. And before we wrap up, and before I forget, I have a very good friend who I told her about the documentary before I'd even watched it. I'd listened to the Joe Rogan podcast, and then I eventually watched the documentary. And she told me how much she loved the documentary. And when I said I'm going to get Phil Demers on my podcast, he said he's coming on. She got massively excited and told me I need to tell you to say hi and that she loved you. So my friend Julia loves you. She wants this on recording. So before I forget.
That's Julia?
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you, Julia. I'm going to say this as wholeheartedly as I can in the circumstances, but I would say that I love you too.
Yeah, she'll get a kick out of that. And yeah, so where can people donate to the cause? Where can people follow you? Where can people learn more about this?
SaveSmooshi.com is a straight up contribution site. If you're looking for some merch, you can go to stealawalrus.com. You can get some shirts and stuff. They're quite nice. They're great. I get a portion of it, of course. I'm largely Walrus Whisperer on my social medias, except for of late. I just recently opened a TikTok account. That one, my handle is Phil Demers. But if you just Google whatever, Instagram Phil Demers or Phil Demers something, it all comes up at some point. So I'm not difficult to find. But yeah, that's it. So watch The Walrus and the Whistleblower, and I try to encourage people to be welcomed to my world, because a lot of people become quite disillusioned or their jaws hit the floor when they see just how crazy things have been. And I emphasize that none of it exists. I don't exist without you guys, without the support. And so in every which way, and I'm stressing to your friend Julia, where she says something to the effect of, "Oh, Phil, I love you." It's like, there is no me without you. So, come join the shit show, man.
Perfect. So yeah, thank you so much for spending your morning with me. It's crazy. Like, I'm always very surprised at how many of the people that I can get on this podcast, and to have you on here, it's been an honor. And we'll get the shirt sent over.
I normally say, "Oh, you don't got to do that," but yeah, you do. You got it.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it with the caveat that you need to post something on your social media and say, like, get me on there. Yeah.
Happy to. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the time, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Don't never stop. Just keep going. Next thing you know, you're going to be on the Rogan podcast. Oh, here we go. Book that flight.
Yeah, that'd be great. But yeah, keep up the fight, and yeah, I look forward to seeing what else you get out of it.
All right, thanks. Stay tuned.